I want to speak of the tree people again. I have spoken of them before, but this time I want to follow the tree people into the gardens. Gardening was so important in the ancient times and very much part of the life of Waitaha, the people of peace of Aotearoa, New Zealand. They came here a long time ago, and against all the understandings of the archaeologists of today, they say that they brought not only the kumara when they arrived nearly 2,000 years ago, but also the potato. If you read the history books, it was only Captain Cook and others like that who brought the potato. But the interesting thing about the potato in this land is that the Māori word for potato, for the seed potato, is peru. And if you just step back from that word and see P-E-R-U, you finish up with Peru, which is of course the home of the potato and the kumara. It's been a great mystery for many years as to, well, a big question, a controversial question of how the kumara got into the Pacific Islands, if there's no record of the Polynesian ever reaching South America. But of course they did, and we know that, but that's another story. In the last 10 years, we have evidence that not only did they reach there, but they carried a very unique kind of chicken from Samoa and Tonga, one with a very special DNA. So that proves the story. The kumara travelled out to perhaps Easter Island, and from there, in the great voyaging of Waitaha to reach Aotearoa, came here, and the potato too. The thing about the kumara was that it was called the peace child. And when it was brought out here, we know from the ancient chants that the women on the waka, and half the women of, say, Rakaihotu's canoe, half the crew were women, and those women carried 2 kumara, one strapped, one bandaged, if you will, beneath each breast. Their job was to care for that kumara on the whole voyage, and care for it until it could be planted. Some of those kumara would have lasted for perhaps 2 years before they were ready for planting. But that's how special the kumara was, and it was the peace child. And that's what they brought to Aotearoa, New Zealand, the way of peace. So there were gardeners. There, of course, were other peoples within Waitaha, the stone people and the fire people and the star walkers and the water people. But today we focus on the gardeners. And they made gardens. And the gardens were made at a special time of the moon, on the brightness of the moon, when they needed huge energy to clear the areas that they had chosen for the planting. And everyone was involved in that hard physical work. And if trees were felled, those timbers were promised to be used in a good way. Before the trees were felled, they were told that today their growing would end, but they would be part of the life of the people as houses, as fences, as whatever was needed to make life easier for the people of this land. But when it came to the planting of the gardens, once they were carefully turned over, the soils readied, when it came to the planting and the nurture from there on, it was only the women who went into the garden. And those who were chosen to be the gardeners, to care for the garden, were those who carried special colours in their aura, who could walk with gentleness, who could bring the spirit of the tree people to the soil, tending the plants. And when those women were seen to be ready to take a full role as an adult in the garden, to take big responsibilities, then some of the hair was cut and woven into the leaves of the cabbage trees that swayed in the breeze, that were in many ways reminiscent of the hair of the women. And thus something of the spirit of each of the women who were part of the team who would bring everything to harvest, part of the hair of the women was bound into the cabbage trees that were always there at the fringes of the garden. And when we look for the gardens in the land today, as an archaeologist, as someone who's looking at things and trying to say where did the people live and where did they plant, we look for cabbage trees. They define the old places. They're very special. But those who showed the colours of the garden, they were picked up very early in life, so some of them only toddlers when they were allowed to come into the garden with their mothers. They showed the colours of the gardeners in their aura. 2 or 3-year-olds who were keen to be there and loved to play and be of the gardens were taught how to carefully take the kumara moth, or the kumara caterpillar at that stage, off the vines, off the kumara vines. They were just taught to work at eye level along the rows, carefully picking these off and putting them into flax baskets. Because, of course, there was a time in the growing of the kumara when the caterpillar had done its job. Of course, it was eating away the leaves that were beginning to die, the leaves that were still taking energy from the plant. But there came a time when they'd stop eating those leaves. They were the first ones they attacked, but then they could come to the healthy ones and do damage. So the little ones helped remove them. It was part of the cycle of life. Those who came into the gardens and tended the gardens were very special. And yet they were watched closely. They were taught that they couldn't come into the garden, that it was forbidden, if they weren't in harmony with themselves and the land. They didn't allow anger and sickness to come into the garden. You see, in those days they believed that what we eat is who we are. What we eat is who we are. And they believed that it's not just a matter of introducing crushed shells into the gardens to bring in something different, some nutrient that it needs. Not only did they bring in the seaweed from the ocean to feed the garden, they did those things, but they understood that the spirit you bring to the garden affects the food. What we eat is what we are. So the gardens were places of peace and harmony, places that had a special spirit around them. They were a place of nurture for those who tended the gardens and those who ate of the gardens. They had a saying about the gardens that I found very interesting, and it's one we could apply today in our modern horticulture where we use so many sprays. They said if the birds don't sing in the garden, there is no garden. If the birds don't sing in the garden, there is no garden. the soil is dead. They also said that each and every one of us is a garden. That was the understanding of the old ways. Each of us is a garden. The newborn child is a garden to be nurtured and fed. The garden within each of us is very special. We can grow in a beautiful way by attending to who we truly are, finding the truth of our journey, understanding that within us is something to be nurtured, a mana, a spirit, something that is bigger than ourselves in a rather special way, that we can tend and nurture and bring into the fullness of the harvest. Each and every one of us is a garden.